I want to give you 5 tips for riding the lift when you're a beginner snowboarder or skier. Hi, I'm Angel, by the way. Thanks for stopping by. First tip is that the lift is often the scariest, most difficult, trickiest part. So that's why I thought it was a good idea to kind of talk to you a little. And in this day and age, you can actually watch the YouTube videos, do some Googling, find out quite a bit before you go up on your first day. I do recommend taking an in-person lesson, group or private if you can, especially at first. And along the way, I actually find there's always room to get better, right? And lessons can go a long way. A well-placed lesson is worth its weight in gold. That doesn't make sense, does it? Anyway, 5 tips for beginner snow players for riding the lift. Tip number 1 is don't be afraid to ask them to slow down if you need them to slow down at first when you're a beginner. There's different kinds of lifts in this day and age. A lot of times there's a secondary loop, which is slow. This lift that I'm on is actually accesses only what's called upper mountain, only no green runs, only blue and black runs. So that keeps beginners from slowing it down. And you probably wouldn't have as much luck asking them. Nonetheless, if it was your first time, you're just getting up the confidence, still okay to ask somebody to slow it down a little. There's usually at least 2 speeds, if not more, on the lift, and they can just give you a little more time, and be aware that they may need to stop it in case you fall down so that you don't get injured. It's happened to the best of us. Don't be ashamed. It's okay. It's better to ask for them to slow down or have them stop it if you've fallen down rather than get hurt, right? That's always better. So tip number 1 is don't be afraid to ask them to slow down. Tip number 2 is relax and try not to make them slow down or stop. If you could just get your butt onto the lift initially, then the rest of it will work itself out. Getting off is the other difficult part. Let's talk a little about staying on the lift. So just to review, tip number 2 would be relax. Just get your butt on the lift. Try not to have them slow down or stop the lift, even though I know I just said in tip number 1, don't be afraid to ask them to slow it down or stop it if you need them to. Tip number 3 is use a safety bar if you have them. I've been, my local resort still has an old school double chair pole in the middle lift. There are all different kinds of lifts in this world. So you may not have a safety bar. Some of the newer lifts are gondolas, or even the safety bar swings down automatically. But a good deal of lifts, especially in New Mexico and Colorado where I do most of my riding, have these safety bars. There's usually a couple handles up here. You want to be careful if it's crowded or not crowded that you don't fall off, because it's a long way down. You're liable to break something. So a lot of times I'll hang my hand over the back here just to kind of give myself the peace of mind mostly. But if it's real windy, or there's other people moving around on the lift chair, you might actually, need that stability of hanging your arm over. But anyway, back to I'm gonna hang this other arm over while I bring this back, because actually the weight of this is, it's fairly heavy, so you do want to be careful bringing it down. And if you're a child, you want to make sure an adult brings it down if possible, because you probably might not be able to reach it, or if you're a small adult. Anyway, comes down, and then this bar sits in front of you. You notice these handles where I was gripping before come down. This is a 3-person lift. Again, there are all different kinds, but typically there'll be handles between the seats, and those are going to have to come down either between your legs, or you're going to have to scoot your legs. As you can see from this seat, if it were full, there's room for people to sit in between these bars. So you'd want to ideally not straddle the bar, although sometimes, especially riding a snowboard with these were designed for skiers initially, I find sometimes if there's room, if there's only 1 or 2 of me, that I tend to want to straddle this bar, because I'm going to kind of show you down here what happens is that your board, I want to drop this phone, so your board can get stuck kind of under that footrest, and it can be confusing and even lead to a little bit of panic at first if you feel like your board's stuck and you can't on the other side of it, especially when you need to lift it up. So keep in mind that there is a slot, usually, at least in the ones I've been on. So there's a thing to put your feet on if it's again designed for skiers, but with a board you can still set your board on that, but you need to get your foot on the other side of the pole and then set your board down on top, your foot, portion of your board down on top of that rest. And then you can rest your foot. You might find, so sometimes if I have the mountain to myself, like today, I might go ahead and buckle in. If I'm familiar with the run, familiar with the lift, know that I can get off and hit the run without having to stop and buckle in. And in that case, I definitely like to straddle the bar and put my board facing the other way so that I can access that other binding back there, basically. So I'd slide my whole body over and put my board on the other side of that footrest. Anyway, that's tip number 3, is to utilize that rest, because your knees, especially even if you don't feel it at first, through the day, your knees and ankles can get really fatigued from the weight of your board and or skis on there. So it's a good idea to use the rest, and also just gives you that peace of mind. You can use a little less energy worrying about falling out of the lift and save yourself a little more energy for falling down the mountain. Let's see, that was tip number 3. Tip number 4 is to make sure and be prepared. I'm just making these up on the fly, can you tell? Be prepared to lift this bar and lift it a little bit before you get to the departure area where you're going to disembark, because especially at first, again, if you're wearing a snowboard, let's see if I can show you that, it's a little bit tricky to get your boot between those bars and lift it up. And if you have more than one person on the chair with you, I've had numerous friends kind of panic and push their feet down on the bar where they're trying to lift up and not be able to lift it at first. I've never had any bad incidences, but it's just that is a, pardon me, my hand's cold, an area that tends to cause anxiety, rightfully so, because it's an area where people tend to fall and get hurt. So it's a good idea to kind of prepare yourself ahead of time. Give yourself plenty of time, a couple of poles, a couple of, what's the word I'm looking for? Poles, a couple of these big lift poles before you get to the area where you're disembarking. Go ahead and lift this up, and to lift it up, you're just going to grab one of those handles or somewhere around it and push it on back behind you, and then you're going to make sure and not slip off. I also should make mention that you're not relying on that bar to keep you safe or keep you in. I've noticed they've changed the terminology from safety bar to relaxation bar in some places, because I think people might have been, leaning out over that bar, relying on it to keep them safe. And that's not a wise idea. It's a long way down. You want to exercise caution, exercise common sense on the lift. That's tip number 4. Prepare ahead of time to get off the lift. And tip number 5 for beginners getting off and on the lift is to converse a little with your fellow riders of your chair about which direction you're going when you get up on the top of the mountain. You'll find this is kind of standard for people who've been riding a while, but sometimes we forget. I forget because I've been riding so long, and sometimes if I'm on the lift with someone who's less experienced, they might surprise me by going a different way than I thought they were going, because I know the mountain, I know which way I'm going. So again, it just takes a little bit of communication before you get to, while you're riding. A lot of times it's nice to talk to people anyway, find out where they're from, or even if you know the people and they're your family, to talk about which direction you're gonna go when you get off the lift, so that you don't just automatically crash into each other and make the lift stop. So let's review those 5 tips for beginners, snowboarders, and skiers on the lift. Tip number 1 is don't be afraid to ask for them to slow it down and stop it. Tip number 2 is try to relax and get your butt on the seat and don't make them stop it or slow it down. Number 3 is go ahead and put the safety bar or the resting bar down carefully and rest your feet and rest your legs. And tip number 4 is give yourself a little time before you get to the end of the lift run to pick that bar up and make sure everybody is nice and safe and secure so that you're ready to get off the lift. And tip number 5 is also during your ride, discuss with everybody you're sitting with to find out which direction everybody's going, so that you don't crash into each other when you're getting off. I'd love to know if you have any tips to add to that for anybody who's beginning, or anything that you've learned the hard way or the easy way that you want to share, please do that in the comments. As always, hope you're enjoying that view. I wish you lightheartedness, love, amazing adventures, peaceful conflict resolution. Give me a thumbs up if you like this video, share it. If you think somebody else might benefit, don't forget to subscribe to my channel. Check out the description for ways you can support me. Got a new t-shirt I just designed I'm excited about. And until next time, ciao.